Welcome into For FF's Sake. Evan Harris here. Really excited for our guest today. We have Mr. Peter Howard. He's probably going to just smack me across the stream for calling him Mr., I think, just from our early conversation. But Peter, introduce yourself to everybody. Glad to have you on, man.
No, that's okay, man. You can just point out that I'm old straight off the bat. That works. I'm very old and uncool and unhip. But no, thanks for having me on, man. Really appreciate it. It's always fun to talk about this particular subject.
Yeah, I'm in my 30s now and learning more and more every day that I'm not young and starting to be considered older. So
I know, right?
We have
it's like being an adult. It happens before anyone tells you. It's like, by the way, you're old now. Did you realize? No, I didn't. Thank you. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah, congratulations. The thing you do are not cool to us anymore. It just happens.
By the way, if you like it, now everyone doesn't. That's the rule.
Oh, that's so true. We are going to have a really fun conversation today about UDFAs, undrafted free agents. You know, if you're a dynasty or fantasy football junkie, these are the type of guys that once the draft's, wearing down, you've got your early, your rookie picks kind of sorted out. These are the guys that you're just dumpster diving on, trying to figure out more. It's like, feed me more, need more players to look at. And these are some of those guys. Before we get jumped into it too much, Peter, tell everybody kind of what you do in the fantasy community, aside from just being an absolute Twitter savage. You do some stuff with DLF, so tell everybody where they can find your work and kind of what you do in the arena, if you will.
I'm a senior writer for Dynasty League Football, or DLF.com. I don't really know what that means. I think I just stuck it around long enough. They gave me a title. I'm like, we should call you something. Okay. And what I do mostly is, I hang around Twitter and I talk about fantasy football. I'm just that sad guy. I've started to make YouTube content and other kind of content. And I've been writing about fantasy football since before I was at DLF. But I'm kind of across the board. I do a bit of everything. I'm literally just someone who plays fantasy football constantly wants to get better because I want to make fun of my friends more. And so I have to beat them. And so I'm always looking to get better at fantasy football. And most of my content reflects me just trying to find a way to hit at a higher rate or miss less often. So it's kind of goes straight across the board from rookies all the way to, last year NFL stats. I will say I don't do any college stuff. College barely exists to me. These players are already, real the minute they declare. That's about it.
I've not gotten into Devy yet or IDP. I started, and I was kind of late to the Superflex game a couple years ago too. So we're slowly transitioning into that. I don't know if I can ever do Devy. I'm too much of a Tennessee Volunteers, just absolute homer. And I would just draft every Tennessee Volunteer. It's like they got the Josh Heupel offense right now. Get every offensive player from Tennessee. That's what you need. So I would fail miserably. All right.
It's like when people mention other sports, like, are you ever going to do baseball? I'm like, you understand exactly how much the hamster and the wheel is spinning just to keep up with the 4 skill position players at football. Like, this isn't all day. This is a full-time job at this point. I have no space. But yeah, sorry. Karen.
When you wake up at 3 a.m. and start thinking about route run success percentages of third round receivers, that at that point you're probably too deep to start venturing off into other sports and positions. I get it. The life. All right. So we're going to talk about some of these undrafted free agents. I'm really excited. If you're listening to this right now, do not come in the comments like, this guy's not going to make a roster, or this guy, you're way too high on them. Look, we're not ranking them with other drafted players or your first and second, third round picks of your rookie drafts. But if you want to get better at fantasy football, like Peter's talking about, you got to study these guys. And at what I've learned with studying, especially some of these undrafted guys, is what you learn, even if they don't hit, is how it's going to help you as you're looking at some other players moving down the line, just getting better at studying players and seeing what matters and what doesn't. If you are ranking players,
you can learn a little bit about how NFL teams are operating. Not that I learn anything about being an NFL team or managing one, but you can see how they're moving their roster and what they're attempting. And you learn a lot. And also every now and again, actually fairly often, especially if you include everyone drafted outside the 4th round, and one of these players becomes relevant. And you don't even have to draft them technically, but it's good to have a heads up. And I actually think one of the things you just mentioned is one of the reasons I prefer looking at them to players drafted in the 5th and 6th and 7th round, which actually have a lower hit rate than undrafted free agents. And it's because really quickly, most of them don't keep their roster spots, so you don't have to waste any more roster space on them. You don't have to waste any more mental. It's like they didn't stick around. That's good to know. Now, there is occasionally someone like Danny Woodhead, who bounced around a lot before we really started seeing him find his stride in the NFL. But that's also a slightly older version of the NFL. I know I'm old, so calling Danny Woodhead's career old is kind of triggering for me, to be honest. But the NFL has been showing a lot more creative in recent years in the way they manage their roster, especially when it comes to trades and the way they hold players and release them. Yeah. And so I think we can have a lot more confidence that literally some of these guys won't be on the roster by day one. So you don't have to, I mean, how many of you are still holding KJ Hamler shares or, second round pick busts because they've got draft capital? These guys you can literally cut and start picking up the waiver wire picks through. Honestly, the minute we get NFL information, they're much more valuable and they normally work out at a higher rate. So I know that's peering through the looking glass for any positive, but the fact you can move away from them quicker, honestly, it's refreshing. It's like I don't have to hold them for 3 years. Awesome. Let's go.
When you're trading with people, right? They're always talking about, well, I have to give up a roster spot for this. Well, that's what's beautiful about some of the players.
It is relevant. About. Yeah.
You're going to,
especially in Dynasty, it's relevant.
Yeah. Put these guys on your taxi. And if they don't make the team or look any decent in preseason, you can actually put preseason of these guys because they're going to play in the preseason. A lot of them that we're going to talk about. So,
and also let's not pretend that half of fantasy football isn't making fun of your friends or, really pretending you knew the future. And there's nothing more satisfying than getting an undrafted free agent before anyone looks for the way. Like, how is this undrafted free agent not on the waiver wire? Well, I'm a genius. That's how. You weren't. You just took a lot of shots. But they don't have to know that.
No, I'm a prophet over here is what I am.
Yeah. I just knew Adam Thielen, day one. Yep. That was me.
When I tell you to draft this player, it's going to be a complete blessed in the 3rd round. You should do that so the player I want calls to me. That's what.
There you go.
All right. So let's just hop right into this. We're going to start with a guy that honestly I didn't know a ton about till recently. I did not do any study on him going into the draft. I saw his name bounced around, but the name is Bryant Koback out of Toledo. He's just a smidge younger than Velus Jones. He's at 24, but a ton of production, right? So 5'10", 209 pounds. He finished his senior year with that's got to be a typo on my statistics. Maybe 17,000 yards, 304. Yeah, that's definitely not right. Maybe 1,340 yards and 18 touchdowns total. I don't know what I did there. Anyways,
I can look him up if you need.
Yeah, he had a bunch of yards his senior year and scored a bunch of touchdowns. Didn't get a lot of recognition. Smaller school guy, but so here's the situation: good speed score, good burst score. Signed with the Minnesota Vikings. But we're going to talk about money a little bit, and I'm just going to let Peter loose on this guy in a minute. 3-year, 2.575. I'm going to be able to talk here in a minute. Million contract, 55,000 guaranteed. So it's not nothing, but it's not a lot. And here's why. If we're going to talk about upside on some of these guys, here's what I like about Bryant Koback. I think Bryant Koback's the guy who could get some play in the preseason, look really good, and then land on a running back needy team in the NFL. I don't think he's going to beat out Kenny Ngwangwu, Alexander Madison, or the drafted Ty Chandler. But I think this is a guy that, there was teams that had interest with him, obviously by the signing bonus, and he's a good looking prospect. So what can you tell me about Bryant Koback, Peter?
Oh, nothing. It turns out I made a quick sheet to look up some fast stats so I didn't sound like an idiot the minute you threw it to me like I'm doing right now. And yeah, I got it wrong, obviously. But yeah, he got about 1,400 yards that final season, I think, by the way. It looks like there's another player with a similar ID, and that might be what's screwing yours up as well. I also have the wrong date of birth, apparently, because I have him as 22 years old, like in September right now. But undrafted free agents are fun. It's hard to get anyone a good consensus on what even their age is, I guess. Yeah, I think he's interesting, but that late declare player from the MAC West with somewhat mediocre production is somewhat disappointing. He's one of the stats I like to use for running backs is adjusted yards per team attempt. It just gives extra credence to the receiving yards while actually just looking through a team level of how productive they were. And his average is like 1.6, and the average of hits is like 2.1. So it's significantly below average, but we are talking about an undrafted free agents, like you said, going to the back of the Minnesota depth chart. So yeah, not a lot of hope, but he was above average for his conference. And like you say, a running back is a running back. And when they're reasonable size and they're shown an ability to carry some sort of load in college, it's not uninteresting to know about them, especially if he makes a depth chart, stays on the team, maybe impresses in a preseason game. You never know. He could work his way into that role that suddenly explodes if opportunity arises.
So the thing I liked about Bryant Koback, and really why I put him on the list, was he did have one of the higher cap hits if he were to make the roster of the free agent running backs. But also, if you go over to Player Profiler, and not trying to give free shout outs, but they had him with a pretty high breakout finder score, which was interesting in and of itself. But the thing that I was just like, all right, this guy may have a chance is Minnesota has done a really good job identifying running backs. And the fact that they wanted to bring him in and gave him a signing bonus just told me that maybe all of some of the advanced stats, right, are not completely off on this guy. He had a productive senior season, 18 total touchdowns is what I had on him, even in a lower conference. So it's a guy that I want to keep my eye on. There is some teams right now that if he were to land on, it would definitely pique your interest, maybe more than where he's at, whether that be Atlanta, which is just kind of a muddied running back situation, and a few other teams. So just wanted to bring him up. The next guy is, I think, a lot more excited to talk about. Every league has this guy where they have a type for free agent waiver claims, and every league has a guy who his type is a guy that changes position, right? Gandy Golden just changed the tight end. Somebody picks him up. It's like he changed tight end. That worked with Logan Thomas if you were early on that train. So
Darren
Waller, position change guy. So Delaney Walker, we could keep going on this now.
That took a while, but yeah, they got there eventually.
You're exactly right. Okay, so this guy changed from linebacker to running back and just burst on the scene for Baylor this past year. Abram Smith is the guy I'm going to be talking about. With undrafted free agents, I like to follow the money. And Abram Smith got one of the top 5 highest guaranteed monies of any rookie at $222,000 this year. He's 6 foot 213, and he plays running back like a linebacker. Can guarantee it. 1,600 rushing yards this past year, 12 touchdowns in his 3rd season. I think it was his first full season playing running back. And we're talking about the Saints, Peter. Not trying to wish EO on a former Vol, but Alvin Kamara, who knows? And Mark Ingram
that's the thing. You don't need Alvin Kamara to step aside when he's mostly a receiver. He's like, I'll be good. I'll just get 2,000 yards over here in the receiving game. I'm good. Well, not too.
That's a team.
You know what I mean? There's room for a rusher.
Yeah. If that's a team that's going to get in the red zone, right? So if Abram Smith becomes their goal line back, which at 6 foot 213, a former linebacker, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities. They obviously like the guy. Do you have any stats on him? Because he's a guy that I want to roster, and I've seen drafted in 5th rounds of rookie drafts.
I don't hate it in your 5th round. You know, that guy who's probably going to be dropped as your first waiver claim comes in. If your rookie draft even goes to 5 rounds, most don't anymore. But yeah, I think there are essentially 3 types. Since we're talking about undrafted free agents, there are basically 3 boxes we end up putting them in, and you have to dig in deeper. But what type of player, what type of potential prospect is this player that's deeper down the roster? And I really think you can talk about 5th, 6th, 7th round picks in the same vein. There's a guy who is underproductive, but is an interesting situation. That's essentially what we're talking about with Bryant Koback. I don't think he stood out. He's an older prospect who played at a decent place and did okay. Let's face it. What he did in college, he was better at something than I'll ever be at anything. Let's not insult the man too much, okay? Like, he's impressive, but that's essentially what he is in terms of whether he'll assume a role for fantasy football. Then there's a guy who looks underproductive, or in fact looks terrible, but it's for reasons. You have to dig in to find it, but like, it's because he was playing a different position, or because he was injured, or because, you know, he literally stepped onto the field for 1 year just because he was done with his basketball career or whatever. And they're weirdos, but if you look at their stats and take into the concept, you can see how maybe they were actually really good, but we didn't get to see the full story.
Yeah.
A name to put on that is someone like Tyreek Hill. That's the epitome of it, right? The guy who played utility player, whatever that means. And obviously in college and in the NFL has a plethora of off-field trouble that is horrific, but it's why he probably didn't look good. Now, I think that's a box we can kind of fit Smith in that he was playing mostly linebacker and was mostly kind of an he didn't do much at linebacker either. And I did, like I said, I didn't think he was playing running back one year and got like 6 carries or something silly. But then in his last year, and there is something called senior difference, teams know players are leaving. They've been working hard on the depth chart for years, and you will tend to lean towards your seniors. They know the playbook better. They're bigger. They're stronger. They've probably got the locker room on lockdown more than anyone else. So there's a difference towards seniors anyway. Yeah. And this linebacker who's done nothing and is huge and apparently can rush a little bit, that might have been what's going on. And he's playing in the Big 12, so it's not like nowhere. He wasn't rushing against, just future car salesmen, but some of what's going on there is probably that he was just a senior and he's big and they needed a running back, and the linebacker who's not doing anything gets it. And that probably means, like Tyreek Hill, like we had to see them, like the team has to be invested for that kind of player. And it's only recently teams have really shown willing to invest time in someone who's undrafted or lower drafted, because they basically have to teach them the position. I mean, 1,600 yards sounds good. So does 1.8 yards per team attempt or 1.9 adjusted yards per team attempt. Not much of a receiver, even in that last year. To be clear, this is a rusher linebacker.
You don't need him to be right if Kamara's there.
Exactly, and he probably did it because he's big and playing in college. So even if he got opportunity on the Saints, you've got to assume he's learning the position still, especially for the NFL level. I mean, we think of the running back position as simpler. To be fair, run at line, but I'm definitely assuming it's more complicated than that. It's very simple for a moron out here like me who's like getting run at by superhumans trying to take you down. It probably takes a little bit more than just being able to run fast and be big. So there is more to learn. But I do think it's interesting that he's weird, that he was a linebacker, that maybe if he did play 3 years, he would have learned the position. And the Saints have taken a shot at him. And it's not like they can find other rushers. That's the one thing we know about running backs. You can find Damian Harris's. You can find players that can fill the gap, to be fair. But they have maybe given Smith a chance to learn the position and be that guy for them. And so I like him. I like the weirdos, especially in undrafteds, because then you get to look back and say the reason they weren't drafted at all was because they were weird. They had to learn, instead of just hoping that it's because every NFL team made a mistake. And so that's why I kind of know a little bit more about Abram Smith, because he is weird. It's weird. He was a linebacker, played 1 season. There's like one other running back in this class I think comes close to a 1,600-yard season, and it's in the Big 12. It's not like it's in the MAC West. Yeah. So, that's why I looked into him a little bit more. I like that weird box.
I love the fact that he's on the Saints, because when you think of some undrafted hits, the Saints have had some of the best ones in recent years. I think back to, I'm going to age myself a little bit, but I think back to Chris Ivory, who had absolutely, talk about weird. He had no college production, right? And just kind of came onto the scene. And I think the year before that, or maybe the year after Chris Ivory, they had another undrafted guy that looked really good in the preseason. Of course, Marquez Callaway in more recent time. Who was the Tony Jones? Wasn't he undrafted last year? Am I off on that?
Yeah. So he's definitely lower, if not undrafted. But
yeah. So they're not afraid to let guys like that make the roster. They're known for that. So I'm excited about Abram Smith. As much as you can be excited about these,
as guys. Much as he can be. Yeah. I hope he stays on the roster. Let's go, Abram.
Hey, if Alvin Kamara gets suspended the first 4 games, you're going to be stoked about having Mr. Abram Smith in the 5th rounder.
I don't know about stoked, but I get what you mean. Yeah.
Well, it depends what your roster looks like. You're going to be excited if you can trade him for a 3rd, right?
Yes.
Hey, it's the stock market. It's the stock market with players.
Kinda. It's like a dummy stock market, but it'll do.
So let me, just quick side note: are you for or against when people say I have shares of this player? Because I've talked to.
Oh God, I don't care. I don't think it's
okay.
I've heard Matt Gailey rant about that, and I get how it could bug you. It doesn't. I don't know. I get more bugged by words like pedigree and stuff because it's like I know they're horses. I get it, but they're not. They're not horses. That's the one that bugs me. But I mean, what else are you gonna say? I understand it. It's a quick reference. Just don't fool yourself into thinking it's more complex than it is. It's just 12 you and 11 of your best friends. Let's not pretend it's like the high level stock market exchange.
Or 10 of your best friends and that one guy in the league you hate, right?
Yeah, right. The guy who doesn't honestly know what's going on. Yeah.
Oh gosh. Okay. Gonna get in trouble now. Some of my league mates are gonna be like, which one? Huh? Which one am I?
Yeah.
Right. Here it comes. All right.
They all know it's me in my league. It's fine.
If you don't think that's in your league, it's you. That's it. All right.
Yeah, there you go.
I can't. Let's jump off the position. I'm already having a ton of fun. We'll come back to running backs. We don't have a ton of receivers to look at, but a lightning rod of an undrafted guy is somebody who did not get expected to get undrafted. I think that's another undrafted category you were talking about earlier. The guy you don't expect to go undrafted, but does because of something off the field or medical. And we'll talk about Justyn Ross. Justyn Ross, wide receiver, Clemson, obviously landed with the Chiefs. Not reported what his guaranteed money was. I wouldn't think it would be a lot because he was one of the last guys to sign as an UDFA. 6'4", 210 pounds. We know the guy. This is going to be one of the most well-known players we talked about.
Oh, yeah. He's the undrafted guy who might be drafted in your rookie league pretty commonly if you're in more than one league. Like, people are taking shots. I've
seen him go in the 4th round. I think it's his high. Best season came as a freshman. Serious injury concerns here. I got some flack for going on a podcast in my league and just saying that, it's as possible that he is paralyzed after a hit as it is possible that he becomes one of the best undrafted free agents we've seen, right? There's some serious concern there. I do want to throw this out there because I think he's getting a lot of hype, but when you just look at the statistics, he never surpassed a 19.3% target share. He had the one, pretty good freshman season, early breakout, then just never looked the same. So I want to know, as much as the stats you're going to share on this guy, kind of where you're at. Are you trying to? I'd love to claim him as a 5th round pick or maybe a waiver wire, but I'm not drafting him in the 4th round or anything earlier than that.
Taking him in the 3rd a couple of times. We got to remember in my leagues where we all think we're something, and we're all on YouTube or in DLF, and it's like there's a different measuring contest going on. I was trying to avoid nasty words in some of our leagues, which is like how brave are you to take the undrafted free agent we all like? And so, you gotta snipe before someone else snipes. And I did feel ridiculous in my next draft. It was actually the league we do for the DLF pods. There's a podcast like group, all of us do podcasts, and we're in the DLF network.
Yeah.
So we've got a podcast, we've got a league, and I was like, I can't. That was just silly. And he immediately got drafted right before me in the 3rd round. I was like, no, I was right in the leagues where we're all playing that type of measuring game. As far as the hits go, yeah, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I have to hope that he and doctors and his family would not put him in a situation. They would not clear him to be in an NFL game if he was literally one hit away. Having said that, the dark part about fantasy football is all these players, and that's why I like being a player fan more than a team fan more than anything else. It's like all these guys are one hit away. It's really scary, seriously. Yeah. But I do understand what you're trying to get at there. Like, we don't know. Like, that injury is for real. For example, that's why Ross is interesting, because before his injury, he legitimately outperformed perhaps the best sign of anyone in this class, T. Higgins, on the same team as a younger player. Like, he was better, not only for his team, but on a per attempt. Like, he outplayed T. Higgins. And T. Higgins is pretty good, we've decided. He's pretty good. Pretty solid. He's pretty good. He's a pretty good player. And it's not that means everything, but like, if that's the way his college career had played out, yeah, you easily could have seen him being a 1st round touted prospect. And in, if not the top 2, then the top 3 conversation from this team. As it turns out, he got injured. And then his performance just was never close to that. It was bad. His overall stats look bad. And I actually put him in that second box with Smith. Like, it makes sense why he's undrafted when you look at his profile. He's got looking real quick, like a 0.9 average yards per team attempt, which is just terrible. Wide receivers average 1.8, and that's not a wide receiver stat, and that's just from his conference. For his career average and receiving yards per team attempt, he's got 1.87. And again, these numbers mean nothing to you. It's a stat I like and no one else talks about, but it's bad. Like, 2 is good. Above that is where we start seeing the T. Higgins of the world, for example.
Yeah.
Especially on average, like the hits have 2.5 and above, and Ross is averaging like a lowly 1.8. But when you dig into his season, you do see this drastic shift pre and post injury. I don't know if his first season was the truth. I don't know if he could ever be that again, even if now he's healed, because that injury may have changed him physically. I literally don't. I'm not a doctor. We say it as a joke these days, like, I'm not a doctor, but it's real. Like, I can't tell. And even if I were to read, or I were his doctor for some really stupid reason, I wouldn't understand the information they were giving me to make the decision.
So
but I do think that makes him in that weird group. That does mean he has all the upside and all of the downside. Like, I would say just one caveat, where we're drafting him in the 3rd round in no leagues. Liking them means nothing. I would say the same thing about, the undrafted free agent money. Not to throw cold water on that, because at least it has real value. You understand it. But NFL to an NFL team, this money is almost nothing, and they bleed money that is significant almost daily. Like, they cut first round picks, and that's millions.
Yeah.
And it does nothing. They're toy teams for billionaires. So the money is real, but it's also it just goes away when it doesn't. And it's the same with liking them. Like Keelan Doss. Wasn't that the guy that we all watched preseason? Oh, yeah. And we loved a fan favorite of what's the show called? Damn it.
Hard Knocks.
The show. Thank you. I loved it because it was an undrafted free agent showing that he shouldn't have been undrafted. He's competing with drafted players and outperforming them in the same setting. It's like, yay, Keelan Doss is going to do something. This is awesome. He's cut before the season. And that's with all that TV hype. That's with fan goodwill. So unfortunately, NFL teams probably have very real decisions I don't understand. So it's not even saying they should have kept Keelan Doss, but it's worth knowing I can like Justyn Ross as much as I like. It still doesn't mean he's not on the roster by week 1. Like, it doesn't. He could literally be on Hard Knocks and do well and not be on the roster by week 1. But that first season is tantalizing.
So he lands in the best possible situation he could have landed in. We'll just say
and that's the other thing, right? No, go. Sorry, I realize I keep talking for way too long.
I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying the heck out of this. I do not apologize for that. So he landed in the best situation possible. So the positives for him, the show is called For FF's Sake. By the way, it's kind of like for argument's sake. Even if we don't like a player, let's talk about what could go well for this guy. For fantasy football's sake, this is why you need to be in on this player. And I'll do that right now. Justyn Ross, obviously, blended with the best situation he could. Quarterback, uncertain wide receiver room. I mean, I don't think anybody's beating down the door for MVS to take on a big role. McCole Hardman's had all the chances in the world. Juju's interesting. Sky Moore, obviously, very interesting. But who's to say that the team that's been giving shots to the guy who cannot, as Stephen A says, stay off the weed, Josh Gordon, they've been giving him chances. So who's to say they won't give Justyn Ross a chance? And here's the thing. So I'll say this. If you're drafting him in the 3rd round, if he comes out in preseason and does what you were talking about, the guy from Hard Knocks, and right. Throw a blank, you'll be able to get value for him if you wanted to trade him at that point. Because
that's a good point, actually. Yeah.
Everybody's going to be on him again. He's had a play from OTAs that Kelsey and Mahomes retweeted and everybody was freaking out about. So I think his value goes up really quickly. And that's for fantasy football's sake why I think even if you don't like him, you should grab him.
Yeah, and the other thing about that, again, I'm like the cold water guy, I guess. I don't know, because I love all of that. It's Kansas City. It's Mahomes. It's why not? I mean, Tyreek Hill literally did this, right? But the team doesn't need a replacement. Let's be clear. Like Patrick Mahomes can still be great and then not be a Tyreek Hill. In the quarterback and wide receiver operate independently a little bit. more than we're willing to admit, because we want the wide receiver one for Aaron Rodgers and Peyton Manning to be great. And normally they are, because they are good as well. But Patrick Mahomes can still have a top 3 season, and Chiefs can still go to the Super Bowl without another Tyreek Hill emerging. Kelsey is fine. Hardman, as much crap as I've given Dynasty owners for continuing to waste second-round picks on him and late first, like he gets 600 yards a season. He puts up 100 yards and a touchdown or 2 every now and again. The team is solid. And so, like, it's not like Ross has to emerge. And I hate throwing undrafted free agent cold water, because normally I'm doing the opposite. But it's, again, like you say, for argument's sake, I get it. But as someone who has been rostering undrafted free agents for a while, just know you're probably cutting them, but it's really interesting. Why not?
It's fun. It's a fun story to follow. And
I would say, like, it depends what positivity. Like Keelan Doss hype, yeah, trade for value. But like I traded way too low on Tyreek Hill, because I've been in this game a while by the time Hill came around. And he had that first season, which was really good, but still people were uncertain. Yeah. Now sells for like a first and Philip Dorsett. And I didn't even like Philip Dorsett. So like how impressive matters. Don't just sell to sell either, you know, because you can still get burnt.
How much is it really worth at that point, right?
Make sure, you know, so this is honestly the part where most people who like football really trust their eyes. They enjoy watching the game. And they know it's like. If you watch him and you think, yes, I would. That's where I'm a weird data tape guy. I'm like, that's fine barometer for sell high or just hold for future, because we don't know. So, you know, if he gets on the field on TV, then maybe take a look, see what you think, and let that be your guide. It's really unpredictable after that point.
Hey, those are great points. Well, let's jump back over to running back. I want to talk about these two guys in tandem, because I know there was one that you had some information on. I had some information on the other one. And we're going to talk about the Steelers undrafted free agent signings at running back, Mataeo Brooks and Jaylen Warren. All right. So I'll start off with Mataeo Brooks. That's a guy I have a little bit of information on. And I'm not a numbers guy yet. Okay, Peter, I'm working on it. I'm trying to get the analytical mind going. I'm just not there yet. But what I do know, and cold water if it will be, he has the largest ever contract for an undrafted free agent from Pittsburgh, reportedly, right? Supposedly, reportedly, whatever. He also had 1,400 plus yards and 11 total touchdowns as a senior, and ran a 4.48 40 at 6'196". He probably weighs a little heavier than that. Just looking at him, I didn't think he was a sub 200 guy, to be honest. He runs with power. Yeah. So 3-year deal, just like all these other guys are going to get, but found that really interesting. Jaylen Warren is the other guy we'll talk about, running back out of Oklahoma State. He got a $12,000 guaranteed. So one of the lowest guarantees we'll talk about. But if I'm a player and I want to play, I'm wanting to go to Pittsburgh because the backup position there is wide open. And that's what we're going to talk about. Neither of these guys are supplanting Najee Harris, but Benny Snell can't. I saw a tweet the other day. Benny Snell can't move, and McFarland is not what they thought he was going to be. He is not McWeapon. Okay, so you need some guys there. So Warren is a 5'8", 207 pound guy. He did transfer to Oklahoma State, so there's a little weirdness for you. He was a transfer.
I do like my weirdness.
1,200 yards, 11 touchdowns rushing. I'll let you start us off on Warren. I like Brooks more out of the two personally. And I'm not speaking for you on which one you like more, but I know you had some data on Warren.
I do, in that he's in my database, so I got to pull him up a little bit. He looks underproductive, but that's including his Mountain West stats along with his Oklahoma stats, because I took a quick glance, okay? His last year, he was averaging, 1.4 yards per team attempt, 1.2 adjusted yards per team attempt. It's pretty decent, but it's still not above average for the conference, certainly for hits going into the NFL. He looks fine. I would say this exact thing, players transferring, is becoming increasingly more common. Something Travis May of RotoViz, if anyone knows where RotoViz is, it's another internet site where we talk about nerdy football stuff. He's been warning, he's like deep into Devi. If I don't know about a rookie, I'll ask Travis, and he says this is going to keep being a problem, and increasingly it's going to change what we're looking for because of the way players can move the transfer portal, increasing the moving teams where they can find better situations. Jameson Williams is probably more high profile example of that this year.
Yeah.
And so I don't know really what to make of him. I do know just looking at his stats, Jaylen Warren doesn't look particularly interesting. He's another Koback, it's like, yeah, the team's going to give him a chance to show he can maybe fall into opportunity, but he doesn't stand out above that for me.
So I think if you're the Najee owner, right, you've either traded a ton to get him or you invested a first round rookie pick in him, either 101 or 102, depending on what your need was last year. Right. So I think looking at these guys as a Najee owner is very interesting and is a guy that go claim one of them on your taxi squad. Because if they don't make the team, you can cut them. It's not a big deal. But if they make the team, there's a good likelihood that they might be the number 2 if something were to happen to Najee and you don't have to pay a 3rd round pick for your handcuff, which tends to be the going rate for a handcuff and the leagues I'm in at least. So here's what I like about Mataeo Brooks. Again, I'm going to follow the money. I know he had 1,400 yards and 11 total touchdowns, but he played for Duke in a not great, conference. Didn't play. Right. I watched him running over N and C State or something in a highlight. It was cool. It was fun, but that's who he played. But again, 1,400 yards plus and 11 touchdowns is not chump change. He looks good in practice. He's already getting reps with the 2s as an undrafted free agent and OTAs. I know it's OTAs, but that's something. You're not going to be able to add this guy to your taxi if he comes out in week 1 of the preseason and puts up 80 yards. Okay. You're just not going to be able to. So that was kind of my thought on both of these guys. What do you think about targeting UDFAs as handcuffs? Because we've seen some undrafted guys become that second string guy or be the guy that steps up if somebody were to get hurt. Tyson Williams was that last year. Tony James was that last year. Jones, excuse me.
Yeah, I think especially at running backs. In fact, running back specifically is a position you should be less concerned about than being undrafted. If they make the roster, they're on the team. Like roster spots in Dynasty, we talk about the value of it, but that's definitely true for the NFL unless they have to cut down to 53.
Yeah.
You have to perform on special teams, and if they're not doing much of that, and they're a running back, like more running backs come from nowhere on a yearly basis than any other position. Like 33% of players who finish inside the fantasy relevant categories of the running back position are actually coming from 4th round picks to lower drafted, and they don't hit particularly high rates, 4th, 6th, 5th round. Any of those picks, undrafted free agents are just as valuable in that range, in my opinion. Everything says that you shouldn't be too concerned about it. So you can move on to ask the more important questions of how are they working into the roster? Are they working into the roster? Do they stay in the team? What are they doing with that opportunity? And in fact, as an undrafted free agent, if you get there without any draft capital, as much as I was cold watering the money, like there's nothing keeping you on that team except what they think of you when you get there and what you're doing on the field.
Yeah.
And that's the other reason I like them. If they do make the roster, there's no reason they did without at least them seeing something worth spending one of their roster spots on it. I definitely like that.
What I see with the money more than anything is it tells me 2 things. It tells me, one, if they're willing to pay them a little bit more, then there's somebody in that room already that likes them, right? 2, if they had to pay more for them, it's because there was other teams that like them. So if you like the profile and they were to get cut, there's other teams that are interested. It just kind of adds a little bit more weight to it. Obviously, it's not everything that matters. I want to, we don't spend a lot of time on this guy, but I want to talk about him because I'm a Titans fan and dadgummit, I'm a homer, okay? Julius Chestnut played for one of the coolest college names ever, Sacred Heart. And if you've ever watched Derrick Henry highlight videos from when he played in high school, that's kind of what Julius Chestnut looked like in college playing against Sacred Heart opponents, whoever they played. I think they played against that fake college that was going around for a while, or fake high school that was going around that actually have 40-year-olds playing for it. I don't know. I wouldn't be shocked. The guy, and I don't know if you have a lot of stats on him, but I'll tell you this, 5'11", 228, bruiser. He is 21 years old after playing 4 years of college. Interesting. He averaged over 100 yards a game for his career and had an absolutely insane 2019 season. I think I'm so excited about Chestnut because I wasn't particularly high on Hassan Haskins. You probably have some information on Haskins.
Yeah, I do. I'm not particularly high on him either.
Yeah, I'm not particularly high on him. And if Henry is to go down, you want that backfield period just because of the style of that offense. I don't think a big guy like that is anything to sneeze at. I think he could make this team. And if so, look out. Just my opinion.
No, I don't mind that running. I mean, it's one of the things, especially with undrafted free agents, we're talking narratives more than trends. And that's why I keep caveating everything, because I'm used to, especially when you're more playing with numbers. And I'm definitely not, I'm not a statistician. I don't know how to do this stuff. I'm figuring it out on my off time from work, right? Like, I'm not going to pretend I understand math even. But what I spend most of the time with that doing is finding out if anything has any real, like something you can sink your teeth into. This is going to help you be right more often than you're wrong. Or if it's just something that sounds good. And it's okay if it's just narrative, like some money. I don't know if that just sounds good or if it means that you're going to be more right. It doesn't mean it's not real. Like you said, there's probably someone in the room that likes them. That's not nothing. That's reality, and numbers can only do so much to represent it, right?
Yeah, fair.
And that's why I'm separating them out. And it's the same with the height and weight stuff. I don't think it makes them more likely, but I definitely don't think it's bad. And I would say if Henry goes down, the team's just better change. I don't think there is anyone that steps into those shoes.
Yeah, I mean, they got Deontay Foreman a second contract, man. I don't know.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, good to see him back. Nice to know people can return from that injury. That's what we keep hoping to see, because, you know, we've had some higher ranked players get that injury. We want to see at least one return. Marlon Mack, maybe Deontay Foreman. But yeah, that's what I'd say. I think he's worth rostering at that size, just like you were saying before. There could be value if he makes the roster at an injured game, or just Henry needs a break in a 17-game season when he's literally got the team on his back most of the time. Then his value can jump up. And that's the other great thing about running backs, undrafted or not. Like, a single game can literally reverse it, because we know that even if they're not that great, they can just be given the role that 1 week, and people have to, if they want to play that player that week, they have to give you a second round pick or a third round pick. And that's not nothing.
That's it. So a funny story. I did it backwards, by the way. I signed Julius Chestnut off of waivers, and then I traded for Derrick Henry. So I was like, I told my buddy, I was like, I already have the handcuff. And he had Haskins, actually. I was like, you can keep Haskins. You know, I don't need him. I got the handcuff already. Just trade me Henry. So I did the opposite of what everybody's doing, and everybody's saying sell Henry. I bought him. All right. If he can put up those numbers, I'm in a win now mode. I don't want to sit on all these picks.
What do you think Tennessee's up to? I know this isn't, I tend to ask random questions, but it concerns me. You know, Tannehill is worth a lot of dead cap next year. Henry is aging, but phenomenal. Only so long he can do that. They definitely don't seem to be going in right now, though, when you trade away perhaps your best receiver ever in AJ Brown's. But they did draft Burks. What's the direction? I don't quite understand it.
So I'll tell you this. I think that Vrabel and John Robinson, both coming from that Patriots lineage. People forget John Robinson, the GM, came out of that Patriot system as well. They have a tendency to feel like they're the smartest guys in the room, and the Patriots' sake, sometimes they have been, right? They have definitely succeeded in some of those situations. So I think if you look at it, if this was the Patriots making this move, we'd be like, oh, okay, another Bill Belichick move, moving a guy who wants money, get it. I think that's kind of what this is in terms of you just sold your best player. I will say this. I don't think that they could afford AJ Brown. I think there's a lot more to that story, just knowing some of the beat reporters and how they looked at the story. AJ forced his way out way more than it was a money thing. He told the Titans he wanted more than what he ended up getting from the Eagles to sign with. So that kind of thing. Titans are interesting, and trying not to put on my homer lens, I'll say this. Henry and or Tannehill will not be with the team next year. I think both of them have an out in their contract. If you look on Spot Rack, even with the dead cap number, they both have an out where they'll both save money, letting go both of them. So I found it interesting. They drafted Malik this year and Haskins in the middle rounds, like the Dollar General versions of those two players. I will say this. I think Robert Woods, they're going to rely on him a lot. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, which is not a sexy player to roster in fantasy football at all, is going to have a couple spot weeks early on. You're talking about a team that has 351 targets to reallocate. And because you're not just looking at AJ Brown, you're looking at Anthony Ferguson, who'd been with the team for a few years, and a few other guys that are not on that roster anymore. I think we rostered Zach Pascal for a few games last year. I don't know how that happened. He's with Philadelphia too now. So there was just some guys that are not there anymore. They want Robert Woods to be their target. I was a little lower on Burks than consensus. So I'm definitely not excited by all this early season talk.
That's the thing. I love Burks as a prospect, but I don't like walking into a situation that's still, like, to me, it looks like a team that gave up. Like, why would you waste a wide receiver's career by drafting him in the first round because everything else looks like they've got no intention of trying to make production.
And Vrabel's
no incentive to do it this year.
Vrabel's been so bullish on rookies too. I mean, if you look at the Titans, I know we're not IDP guys, but Christian Fulton was a guy who hardly played as a rookie and then broke out last year as a sophomore, second year corner, right? Jeff Simmons, who was the big D tackle, didn't play a ton of it as his rookie year. AJ Brown took a little bit to get going because Vrabel just doesn't trust rookies. So I'm really curious because you got to trust Burks at this point. Like you need him on the field. So I don't know. I do think this though, as much as we make a big story about AJ not being on the team and they don't have Julio anymore, they didn't really have those guys a lot last year. They were winning games without them a lot because they had to. So I will say that I saw the stories of why didn't they just trade Henry and keep AJ? And just from a football perspective, absolutely right. But when you look at that team's makeup, Henry was a lot more important to them in terms of wins versus losses than AJ was. So I don't know. I think it is, you're absolutely 100% on it to be a little curious about what they're doing. I am as a fan too. Okay. But I think Robert Woods leads them in receiving this year. And I think Austin Hooper might be one of the biggest sleeper tight ends in fantasy football right now.
I do like Hooper. I like players who've shown they can co-opt the volume before, if you know what I mean.
And
I know it also just feels like a retraction of the offense is due.
It does.
Less rushing attempts, less pass attempts, less attempts because they're successfully completing less. Yep. And it'd have to be in that situation, you know?
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Sorry, didn't mean to get you off track, Aaron.
I'm always game to talk Titans. What are you talking about? My mind is a squirrel moment all the time, so I'm cool. We don't have a ton of more guys to talk about that are super interesting, and we can rapid fire some of them. One guy that is interesting, he got the most guaranteed money of any player I could find of what was reported. Kennedy Brooks with the Philadelphia Eagles. I think
yep.
Everybody's got an opinion about the Eagles running room, and I think everybody's a little bit different. Some people like Miles Sanders. Some people think Gainwell could have a second-year breakout. I've seen a lot of people think Kennedy Brooks is the guy that's going to get the workload. I think the best running back on the Eagles is Jalen Hurts, personally. I think he probably leads the team in attempts.
I think that's probably the best answer. Yeah, just after Jalen Hurts.
But what do you think about Kennedy Brooks? So Oklahoma played at a big time school, former 4-star, 3 1,000-yard seasons, right? 13 touchdowns in 2021. Not really a receiving threat. He's not that satellite back you want. But what do you got on him?
Yeah, I got roasted by a friend and colleague of mine at DLF and not having him on my undrafted free agent list. And the honest reason is I hadn't updated his information. I didn't know he'd been signed, but I had to come up with reasons not to like him. But honestly, the reason I hadn't noticed him is I kind of wrote him off last year. I was looking at him last year because of Trey Sermon, and I didn't like what I saw with that running back. I haven't seen a single running back outproduce that situation. They just all kind of do what that situation's limit is. You get the volume, you do that, you do X. And what I'm tend to look for, not because that's what every player that hits does, but because what else are we going to look for but a player who does better than most would in the same situation. Mm-hmm. And what I'm seeing is a bunch of running backs getting transferred. One takes over from the other and they do about the same thing. And then the NFL takes a whole process, millions of dollars spent. And it's not like they weren't aware of Oklahoma, and they can make mistakes too, but you have to make the bet that the entire NFL took a look at Brooks and was like, this guy's bad, or they forgot him. And I don't know about that. And so the excuse they came up with, because it was literally an excuse, that's all true. But the reason it wasn't on my list is because I forgot. But it's like, yeah, I'm not sure about the guy who did nearly as well as Trey Sermon. That's not the guy I want to.
Trey Sermon comparison. So
but it's fine. It's a Koback argument. He's on a team, so on and so forth. And he was productive at Oklahoma. I'm not going to say, again, better at anything than I'll ever be at something. I'm not going to throw too much sand on his face, because he'll kill me. But I do think, the story you have to tell yourself is literally everyone made a mistake or they forgot Oklahoma existed for a season. And that's weird. I don't know. I can convince myself that one. Like, they knew about him.
Interesting.
They're drafting, Koback and Hassan Haskins, and no one was like, how about that guy who had 3,000 yards? No? Okay, cool. Nah. Like, maybe he was, like Sherman seems to have been, a product of the volume of being a really good college football player, which is not nothing, but it doesn't make me excited that he could advance that. What is essentially the highest jump in skill position in, like, yeah. I'm not going to get into this conversation again, but I have a hard time finding a composite of the level of jump from, like, college football to the NFL. It's not that college football is so simple, it's just, you've got the guy who was the best athlete in the best room of every room he ever walked into. Yeah. And then he got to college and everyone was that guy. And then they siphon him again. It's like those who get to go to the moon. That's the only comparison I found, that the astronauts actually get to go to space, because to get in that program, you have to be like the smartest, most well-tempered person you ever met in your town, your state, and then you get filtered, and then you get in the program and everyone was that guy, and then only a few of them actually get to go to space. It's like, that's the level of filtering we're looking at. And then you talk to Travis May, and it's like, not really, Pete. They all come from the same 4 high schools. It's like, what? It's it's really inbred, apparently. But at the same time, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to get off.
That was a funny exchange on Twitter. I saw that.
Yeah.
So I heard an interesting take about Trey Sermon, not to just rile you up some more. I was out on Trey Sermon last year. I thought Mitchell could have a better year, and he did. Unfortunately, I didn't put my money where my mouth was and draft enough Mitchell. But I heard an interesting take about Trey Sermon that it just kind of piqued my interest enough to make me, if I can buy Sermon cheap, I might, and you can right now. So the take was that they felt that Shanahan drafted Sermon because he excelled in the read option scheme, and that's what Trey Lance would do. And then Trey Lance wasn't ready last year, so Sermon just kind of stepped behind, because when we saw Sermon on the field, he didn't look terrible. He just didn't really get on the field. So if that's the case and Lance is the starter this year, I would not put it past Shanahan to be like, yeah, JK, I really like this guy. We're talking about the same guy who has had like different RB1s for the last 5 years and made us all try not to remember that Brandon Ayuk was a thing for a while last year.
Yeah. No, I rostered Sermon a few places, and I did not draft him at his value last year, put it that way. But I think it's really important to remember, every year we're looking for the players who are going to do it. The opportunities open up, the story this offseason. And like, this is why I rely on numbers, because my memory's fuzzy. And it just feels like there were always these reasons, like, why didn't Brian Edwards work out, or Keelan Doss? So you start counting it, not because it's truer or better than your evaluation of that situation. You just start wondering, like, does this ever work? And no, it doesn't. Every year we convince ourselves that that's the reason N'Keal Harry didn't work out. Tom Brady didn't like him. And now Tom Brady's gone. N'Keal Harry, the slot king, will get, and it always sounds reasonable, because it is reasonable. It's very, very reasonable.
My favorite saying is range of outcomes. It's in the range of outcomes.
Because everything is just, for free. Sure. Go for it. But just know, like something crazy, like 98% of the things that we find incredibly reasonable, that make perfect logical sense, they're coherent. They're not, you're not idiots for believing it. The people saying it and writing about it aren't not doing their due diligence. It's just most of the time, like the vast majority of fantasy seasons are produced by a very small minority of players.
Yeah.
And you can honestly just default to who did it last year. That's probably a better hit group.
That's the highest hit rate you can get.
If you've got an edge, like you watch football and you notice things that, like, that's why I say, yeah, if that works for you, you should keep doing it, because outside of that, yeah, the players who are doing it are probably the ones that are going to keep doing it vast majority of times.
All right, I got to bring up some other receivers before we jump off here, because we've been going at it for a minute and I don't want to outwear my welcome here. So Dontario Drummond is a guy who he has a big name, right? Wide receiver out of Ole Miss. Landed in an interesting situation with the Cowboys, especially since they have some guys banged up right now. 6'1", 215 pounds, terrible 40 time, but he had a 25% target share in his
he's a receiver,
year.
Right?
Yeah, he's a receiver.
Yeah, he better be. Looking at these stats, 1.6 receiving yards per team attempt. Yeah, I don't find him particularly interesting. I think Talbot is actually like a 4th round pick or so. Actually, has some more interest there. I think that offense is another one I'm scared about. Like I like Talbot. I love Michael Gallup. I really like CeeDee Lamb, but that offense is going to restrict without Cooper on the team.
Really?
And I guess we're expecting Zeke to just not play. I guess based on his ADP, he's like running back 25. Yeah. I don't fully understand it. Tony Pollard is lower than that, so it's not like everyone's already projected him over it. I think the offense is going to retract a little bit from what it has been doing, because I don't think we can reasonably expect CeeDee Lamb, based on what he has done, to do an Amari Cooper impression. But I do think he's a phenomenal receiver by himself. He's getting like 7 targets a game as it is. And I think it's very reasonable to expect 8. Not a 23% jump, but 8 targets a game. He gets 2 yards per reception. He's T. Higgins, but with Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup on the field, not just Burks. And, T. Higgins hasn't had Burks every year. And CeeDee Lamb has had both Cooper and Gallup every year of his career. So I actually think there is more upside in CeeDee Lamb. But where was I? I'm getting lost in the sauce here. Yeah, I do think the offense can restrict and CeeDee Lamb still be great, and Ezekiel Elliott still be a top 12 running back, even though did he retire? Really? I was looking at his ADP the other day. I was like, did I miss something? Did he retire? And I don't know it.
Because everybody was, dogging him last year, and I know it wasn't a Zeke year, but I still think he finished like a low end RB1. Am I completely off on that?
To be fair, it was a terrible running back year, but I don't know. It just seemed seriously, I was wondering if I'd missed news. He'd left the team, or he torn his ACL or something. But anyway, I don't think so. I just think everyone is bored of the old guys, which is weird because for 2022, it's probably going to be an old guy year. We saw a lot of youth come in. They're going to age, and so the age curve is going to come up anyway. And a lot of running backs that got injured last year are going to be, hopefully, God willing, healthy again. So I think we're going to go back to form. And also, Jacob Rickroad's favorite thing right now, well, not his, I don't know if it's his favorite, but he keeps talking about the 2017 class as the new 28 class. And he has a point. Like, we haven't seen like a 6-year top 5 running back for 6 years, but that's because the 2017 class hasn't hit year 6 yet. That's next year. And of classes like those two, 2008, 2017, they just look like different breeds. Every year, they're 30% plus of the top 5 and top 12 players. And Barkley's back. CMC's. I've gone off on the weeds again here. Sorry, man.
No, you're
I'm
going
to
to
outstay my welcome.
Something though. I think that's why so many people are excited about the 2023 class, because it's going to come right at kind of the end of that.
Yes, it's going to be the replenishment year, right?
Yeah. I mean, it really does kind of look like that. There's that's class. I'm not a W guy either, but that class, when you just look at some of the running back names, I'm like, oh, that's nice. Oh, Bijan Robinson. Yeah. Yes, please. Jahmyr Gibbs going to Alabama for his senior year. He's probably going to be overdrafted, but I still think he's very talented. I think
no, I've come far enough that, and I'm willing to admit what I don't know enough, that I've learned to just I don't know if the 2023 class is great or crap, but I do know every time there's this much buzz, it's 2021 had it, and that worked out pretty well. I'm always suspicious. I always squint at hype because we always seem to love rookies. And, 2015 and 16 and 17 happened. And we still loved all those rookies. But the Devy community is as good as a Dynasty community, as good as a redraft. They're just doing a different thing. So if they're saying 2023 is good, it's probably pretty good.
Probably, You've missed your window to buy those picks, is what we're just saying.
Honestly, in Dynasty, that's where I'm at. I'm like, if you're rebuilding by 2024, it's too late. It's too late. Everyone knows. It's too late.
Oh, man. I do think that the Superflex community really bombed the 2022 class in a sense because the quarterback class was so bad.
Oh,
but the skill position wasn't as bad, I think, as proposed, maybe. Now, we did have two guys like Williams who came out of nowhere and Kenneth Walker who came out of nowhere. I'm not near as high on both of those guys as consensus either.
Right.
But I think there was some solid depth in this class. I think, I don't know. We're all going to think that right now because we all have a rookie feel.
Here's where I get stuck. Like, I know, because I camp things because I don't know anything. Like, I know there are good players here. Like, every year, like, even disappointing years, eventually, by the time you get to the end of the first 4 years, you've got 2 top 12 players. Like, you don't want to give DeAndre Hopkins and Keenan Allen away for nothing, but we knew that was a terrible class. 2018 and 17, and I just trashed 15 to 18, was terrible. But we've had top 5 and top 12 players from that class. We've had great players from that class.
Did you draft Corey Davis? Is that where this?
Oh yeah, definitely. I made that mistake across the board. I hammered the table hard. I was Kyle Shanahan for Joe Williams on that day. And it didn't work out. Like, I keep trying to justify he was top 25 that once. And it just didn't work out. And then you see AJ Brown step in and show that it's not the team. A good player can make a situation. It's that simple. Like, step aside, Mr. Corey. Let me show you what can be done in this exact same situation. Oh, that's good to see. And I still love Corey Davis. Like, again, a good NFL player for sure, but not everything we hope. But especially when you're talking about depthy classes, that's the phrase that triggered me. Like, sometimes it can just take a minute. And so, like, don't lose. Like, again, they have to do something. But, I mean, sometimes depthy classes can take a while. Olave is not going to Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase this year. No chance. There's no Amon-Ra St. Brown this year. But if David Bell gets to 400 to 600 yards this year, I'm going to be really excited about it. He's not going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown, but a 3rd round prospect making the depth chart, earning a role. That's what we're looking for this year.
We
aren't even talking those rookies, and I'm into it now.
We've been spoiled, man, by Chase and Jefferson. I was ready. I cut Terrace Marshall this offseason. I'm like, he's not going to be anything. He didn't do anything. He wasn't Jefferson or Chase, but no, we have definitely been spoiled by that. All right. Well, we don't even got to go into these other guys. I've had an absolute blast talking with you on these guys. Is there any? I know we haven't talked about them all. Is there an undrafted guy we haven't mentioned that you just absolutely are a stand for and you want to talk about real quick? We'll wrap up. That.
I learned about some from the questions you sent me, to be honest with you. I will mention there were a few I've got ranked that you hadn't mentioned. That's Derek King. I think he was a depth quarterback ad by New England, but I don't have it listed here. He's made my list anyway to look into. He did?
Yep.
Forget that then. Zonovan Knight. I think he's still on the Jets roster.
Yeah.
And, Breece Hall is a guy, but still. He stood out a little bit, enough to be ranked pre-draft, and so I'm noticing him. Ronnie Rivers, who I think we're going to talk about, and then there were some tight ends. But anyway, we don't need to. It's okay. I'm like Jalen Windermere, I think, is an interesting tight end. But
yeah, Watermeyer, something a good athletic profile.
I'm more interested in the tight ends in this class, and I think I should be because no one else talks about them. Undrafted all the way up to Trey McBride. I'm like, why does no one like? I think they look pretty good this year. And
Jelani Woods is in a great situation,
and he's more athletics than he is production numbers. But yeah, he's in a great situation. He is athletic, and the team likes to use the position. I don't hate it.
Yeah. Some of the tight ends, just to kind of spout on real quick, that I've heard about out of OTAs, and I follow beat reporters. I'm a former journalist myself, so I just kind of do it. Cole Turner has gotten a lot of hype out of Washington. I think he's interesting. Jelani Woods, of course, is just a really good athlete. If he can catch on there with Matt Ryan for 1 year, maybe he can make something. Mo Alley Cox is not a tight end one, so it's not like he has a ton of competition. Those were two guys that really jumped out to me. Of course, you got the tight end at New York, Bellinger, I think. And they're saying he could get early work.
Daniel Bellinger. Yeah, he's interesting. I was actually more attracted because I thought he was going to go undrafted. That's Isaiah Likely. Instead, he got 4th round draft capital. He's really interesting to me. I mentioned him in my 4th undrafted late round gems kind of content. And yeah, it is Jalen Windermere. He's on Buffalo. I don't know. They've really got Diggs on that team, who's obviously the receiving weapons. But everyone's obviously somewhat interested in Gabe Davis. But I didn't mind Windermere's stats so bad. And he's one of the few that actually measure up to the tight end standards. Like, I tend not to use height, size, and weight anymore. Like, I like to know it, but it doesn't help me too much know who's good and bad. But like tight end, it's almost like you've got Kyle Pitts and Evan Ingram that the exceptions. Anyone under 250 pounds is almost too small. Like even Jimmy Graham was over that. So yeah, sorry, Ken.
Athletic tight end Chigoziem Okonkwo. I think they call him Chig. With the Titans. He's in a good situation. One, he profiles a lot like Jonnu Smith, and he's on the Titans, so they obviously know how to use that type of profile. And he comes to them with only Hooper ahead of him, who I'm high on Hooper for this year, but Hooper is on a 1-year deal. So just kind of interesting usage there because the Titans throw a lot to their tight ends.
I've got him listed in Pittsburgh, so I got to fix that. Thanks.
No, he's with the Titans.
Okay. Damn it. It's hard to, again, it's like the whole reason I originally built a database, like these things that we're interested in, and for some reason you can't get any one place. And so you end up taking it from several places and none of them agree. Like undrafted free agents are that. Like when ones do well, it's like the devil to find out what their first year was, unless you're doing it right now. Like I know when these guys were drafted or undrafted. Most are listed in the first year they record stats.
Yeah,
like Adam Thielen was a 2014 undrafted free agent, but he's listed as 2015 a lot. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting way off into the weeds here. But yeah, he's one of the great 2014 class. I like to remember that. So when I first went and looked him up, he was listed under a different year.
Go look on Twitter for Peter Howard. PA Howdy, I think is the at. Once you find the Homer Simpson doing math, you'll know it's him. New picture may be coming. I tried to give him a good idea earlier. We'll talk about that later.
It was a good idea. I just don't think I have the stomach for it.
So
that made it sound bad. No,
is the YouTube channel just Peter Howard? Is that how they find you?
Yeah, you can find me everywhere at PA Howdy. Just hit me up on Twitter. We'll talk football whenever you want. And there's a link tree on Twitter where you can link to like whatever I'm doing on YouTube and DLF, and you can go get my database for free and stuff. And that tends to be the easiest way to find me anyway, because I live on Twitter. I know everyone talks about what a hateful place it is. I mean, join the fantasy football community on there. I get nothing but fun interactions. Like I'm almost starting to feel like either everyone else is making it up or I'm not making it till people start being mean. So I'm going to keep staying out here till people do it, I guess.
I mean,
I really appreciate you having me on, man.
Yeah. Somebody may say you have a dumb take, but you get that in your fantasy league. So that's not hate.
Yeah. It's like, I know I definitely do. That's probably true. That's fine.
All right. I'm going to hit the outro. Good having you.
Thank you for listening. Follow For FF's Sake on all social media platforms and search for us wherever you get your podcasts.